My brother sent the video by accident. I know that because 30 seconds after it hit my phone, he sent 11 consecutive question marks and then called me 4 times in a row. I did not pick up. I just sat at my desk and watched it play. It was filmed in the backyard of my parents' home in Scottsdale, the home I had been quietly paying the mortgage on for 3 years. My sister Danielle was reclining in a new patio chair, holding a glass of white wine, laughing at something off camera. My mother was beside her in a floral sundress. And my brother-in-law, Marcus, was standing near the outdoor grill I had purchased as a birthday gift last spring, pointing his beer bottle directly at the camera like a prop in a comedy sketch. "Layla thinks she's doing something with that little job of hers," Marcus said, grinning wide. "She's out here playing grown-up businesswoman, and the woman can't even show up to a family dinner without looking like she raided a clearance rack." My sister covered her mouth and laughed. My mother did not correct him. She shook her head slowly, the way she always did when she was about to agree with something she wanted deniability for later. "She's always been like that," Danielle said, leaning back. "Thinks she's smarter than everyone. Meanwhile, Marcus and I are actually building something real." "What is she building? Spreadsheets?" More laughter. My father walked into the frame, kissed my mother on the cheek, and chuckled when Marcus repeated the punchline. My father, the man who had called me the month prior to tell me that the property tax bill had come in high and that the family fund was running short, laughed at a joke about my career while standing on a patio I was paying for. I watched the video twice. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and looked out the window of my 43rd floor office in downtown Houston. Sisters, if you have ever been the financial foundation of a family that treats you like a footnote, stay with me. Because what happened next was something I had been quietly preparing for a long time. My name is Layla. I am 32 years old, and for the past 4 years, I have been the invisible infrastructure of my family's comfortable life. Not because I had to be, because I believed for far longer than I should have that if I just kept giving, eventually they would see me. What they saw instead was a target. My family knew me as the quiet one, the one who went to a state school while Danielle got the private university my parents stretched themselves for. The one who moved to Houston after graduation to take what my mother called some number-crunching job. She said it exactly like that, with a light, dismissive wave, as if what I did was alphabetize receipts in a basement somewhere. What I actually did was build a financial consulting and asset acquisition firm from a 2-person operation in a shared workspace into a company managing over $1 billion in restructured commercial debt. My firm had 12 full-time employees, 3 of the largest regional banks in the South as retainer clients, and a real estate acquisition portfolio worth more than I could have imagined the year I graduated. My family had no idea. I had never volunteered the information, and they had never genuinely asked. My mother knew I worked in finance. My father knew I did well. Danielle assumed I was a glorified accountant with a nice apartment and delusions of grandeur. Marcus, who had spent 4 years burning through investors' money on a restaurant concept that had not yet opened a single profitable location, considered himself my intellectual and professional superior without ever having read a balance sheet correctly in his life. I had funded them quietly and deliberately, the same way I did everything. After my parents refinanced and fell behind, I set up an anonymous transfer through a holding entity I controlled. I told myself it was temporary, a bridge. Then the bridge became a highway, and the highway became a lifestyle. And somewhere along the way, they stopped being grateful and started being entitled. The night I watched that video, I did not yell. I did not call my mother crying. I opened my laptop, pulled up the master account dashboard I used to manage the family-linked transfers, and I began to plan. The first thing I did was call my attorney. Not to threaten anyone. Simply to confirm the legal structure of every transfer I had made, that none of it created a legal obligation, that every dollar was a personal gift documented as such, and that I could cease at any point without liability. My attorney confirmed it in under 20 minutes. The second thing I did was schedule a family dinner for the following Sunday. I sent the invitation myself, warm and casual, and said I had some news to share. I needed them together. I needed them comfortable. A cornered animal panics. A comfortable animal drops its guard entirely. I arrived at my parents' Scottsdale home at 6 o'clock on Sunday, with a bottle of wine and a very specific agenda. Marcus was already there, holding court in the living room, explaining to my father why his restaurant concept was simply ahead of the market. Danielle was in the kitchen helping my mother, which mostly meant standing near the counter describing the vacation she wanted to take to Portugal. I smiled at everyone. I hugged my mother. I said the food smelled amazing. I was so warm and so pleasant that by the time we sat down, every single one of them had completely forgotten what they had said about me on camera 6 days earlier. The dinner conversation stayed light until my father cleared his throat and set down his fork. Actually, since we're all here, he said, reaching to the side of his chair for a manila folder I had not noticed, there's a family matter we've been meaning to address. He slid the folder across the table to me. Marcus sat up straighter, the way he always did when he thought he was about to win something. Inside the folder were documents. Marcus had located a commercial property in the Scottsdale Arts District, a large mixed-use building he wanted to convert into his restaurant flagship. He needed a cosigner on the acquisition loan. The number on the term sheet was $340,000. You have the strongest credit profile in the family, my father said. His voice had taken on that gentle, reasonable tone he used when he was asking for something he expected to be refused and was trying to preempt the refusal with reasonableness. And Marcus has a real vision here. This is the one that makes everything work. This is the investment that puts the whole family in a different position. My mother reached over and touched my hand. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, sweetheart. Danielle smiled at me from across the table. The same smile from the video. Expectant. Certain. I looked at the term sheet. I looked at the property address. I recognized it immediately, the way you recognize your own handwriting. The building at 4th and Camelback. I knew that building intimately. My acquisition team had purchased it 14 months ago through a subsidiary LLC as part of a distressed commercial portfolio. Marcus was trying to borrow money to lease a building I already owned. I closed the folder. I need to think about it, I said, and smiled, and asked my mother if there was more bread. I let the dinner end warmly. I hugged everyone at the door. I drove back to my hotel, sat in the quiet of my room, and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to feel everything I had been carrying. The loneliness of every birthday they had made perfunctory. The silence from my entire family the year I closed my first 7-figure deal and had no one to call. The graduation from my MBA program that my mother missed because Danielle had a bridal shower that weekend and someone needed to help set up the floral arrangements. 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and I went to work. The first call went to my property management firm. I instructed them to pull every pending lease application for the 4th and Camelback building and hold approvals until further notice. If Marcus had submitted an inquiry, and I suspected he had, it would now sit unanswered in a queue. The second call went to the bank that held my parents' mortgage. Not to do anything dramatic, simply to confirm what I already knew, that the account linked to the automatic payment was mine, and that I could modify the payment schedule with standard notice. I did not cancel anything that night. I simply stopped renewing. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. Marcus arrived at a meeting with the commercial lender he had been courting for 8 months. He was there to present his business plan and formalize the cosigner arrangement he assumed I had agreed to. He had not waited for my answer. He had told the lender I was already on board. The lender pulled his credit report and his business financials. Without my co-signature, which I had never provided, the loan application was incomplete. The lender's assistant called Marcus while he was still seated at the conference table to inform him that without a qualified cosigner, the application could not proceed to underwriting. Marcus called me 4 times before noon. I was in a client meeting and let each call go to voicemail. His messages went from confused to concerned to a 5th message that dropped all pretense of politeness. I listened to all 5 on my drive back to Houston. Then I called him back. There must be a misunderstanding, he said immediately, his voice carrying that clipped corporate edge he used when he wanted to sound authoritative. I told them you were on board. I need you to call them today and confirm. I didn't agree to anything, Marcus. A pause. Layla, this is a family investment. It's a $340,000 loan obligation with your name on it and your track record attached to it, I said. I reviewed the financials. Your last two concepts lost money in every operating quarter. I won't be signing. The silence that followed was the kind that comes right before something breaks. You know what your problem is? His voice had changed completely. The corporate veneer was entirely gone. You've always been jealous of what Danielle and I have built. You sit up in Houston alone with your little job and you can't stand seeing your sister actually living. This is why you don't have anyone, Layla. This is why you'll always be on the outside of this family. You're selfish. You always have been. I let him finish. Check the lease application you submitted on 4th and Camelback, I said quietly. You might want to look at who owns that building. I ended the call. I want to tell you, sisters, that what happened next gave me some satisfaction. I will not pretend otherwise, but it was not cruelty. It was consequence. There is a difference, and I have spent a long time making sure I know which one I am operating from. My mother called me that Thursday. She had received a notice from the mortgage servicer, the automatic payment she had come to depend on without ever asking too many questions about its origin had not processed. She was not angry at first. She assumed it was an error. "Sweetheart, there's something strange with the house account," she said. "Did something happen with the transfer?" I paused it, I told her. A very long silence. "You what?" "I've been covering the mortgage for 3 years, Mom. I'm going to need to restructure how I'm handling family support." "I'll follow up in writing." She did not respond the way I expected. She did not yell or cry. She got very quiet in a way that was almost worse, and then she said, very carefully, "I think we need to have a family conversation." That family conversation was scheduled for the following Saturday. I agreed to attend. What my mother did not know was that I had already reviewed the guest list she had quietly assembled. She had invited my Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister, who functioned as the family's unofficial moral authority and had a gift for making dissent feel like sin. She had invited my parents' pastor, who was a kind man but also someone my mother had cultivated for exactly these moments, when she needed the weight of communal expectation to close a deal. She was building a pressure chamber. I walked into it wearing a $4,000 blazer and a legal pad. The living room was arranged as though for a meeting. My father sat at the center. Aunt Patricia was in the armchair she always claimed. The pastor smiled at me warmly and called me by the wrong name. He called me Diane, which told me exactly how often I had been mentioned. Danielle sat beside Marcus, who had not looked at me since I walked in. My father began with a prayer. He was a gifted man with language, and he knew how to frame things. The prayer was about family unity and the danger of pride, and the way God calls us to sacrifice for the people we love. I bowed my head and I listened, and I knew every word was aimed directly at me. When he finished, my mother opened the conversation gently. She talked about how hard things had been. She talked about the pressure Marcus was under, the opportunity he would miss, the way this particular building, was the break they had been waiting for. She talked about what family means. She talked about how some of us had been blessed with more and what that blessing carries with it. Aunt Patricia leaned forward. "Layla, honey, your grandfather used to say that money you keep for yourself rots. Money you invest in your people multiplies." The pastor nodded. Marcus said nothing, but his jaw was tight. I looked around the room at the architecture of this intervention. They had assembled it beautifully. The elder relative, the spiritual voice, the wounded parents, the struggling couple, and then me, the selfish one, the absent one, the one who needed to be brought back into alignment. I opened my legal pad. "I want to walk through something," I said. My voice was completely even. "Over the past 4 years, I've made the following transfers in support of this family." I read the list, not to shame them, to establish a factual foundation for what came next. 37 months of mortgage payments, Danielle's car insurance for 2 years after Marcus's startup missed payroll, my father's back surgery copay, the landscaping contract my mother signed without checking the budget first, the catering deposit for Danielle and Marcus's wedding that I had covered anonymously as a gift. By the time I reached the bottom of the list, the room was very quiet. "I did all of that because I love this family," I said, "not because I was obligated, not because I owed anyone anything. Because I wanted to help, and I believed the help would be received with some degree of care." I set the legal pad down. I watched a video last week, I said. Someone accidentally sent it to me. I'd rather not describe it in detail because I think everyone in this room who was there already knows what was on it. Danielle looked at the carpet. Marcus went very still. I'm not here to relitigate that. I'm here to tell you that I've made a decision, and I want to make it to everyone's face so there are no misunderstandings. I looked at my father, then my mother, then Marcus. I won't be co-signing any loan. I won't be resuming the mortgage transfer. And I'm going to begin the process of unwinding the other financial arrangements I've been managing on behalf of this family. I'll give everyone 60 days notice on each item, documented in writing, so no one is caught off guard. Aunt Patricia started to speak. I raised one hand. I'm not finished. I turned to look at her directly. I've heard a lot about what family means this afternoon. I'd like to offer a different perspective. Family means that when someone shows up for you, you protect them. You don't record them being mocked at their own expense on property they're paying for, and then sit quietly while it happens. I glanced briefly at my mother. And when someone confronts you about that, you don't assemble a room full of people to pressure her into compliance. The pastor cleared his throat gently. Layla, I think what your family is trying to— With respect, I said. You called me Diane when I walked in. I don't think you know enough about this situation to mediate it. He blinked. My Aunt Patricia pressed her lips together. I stood up. I was not angry. I was not shaking. I was simply done. 60 days, I said. In writing. I'll be in touch. I walked out of my parents' house, got into my rental car, and drove straight to the airport. What followed was swift and, from where I stood, entirely logical. Marcus had borrowed against a future lease on a building he did not own, using a co-signature I had not provided, to present to a lender who had now flagged his application as materially misrepresented. The lender's legal team made several calls. My property management firm, following standard protocol, confirmed the ownership structure of the building. The inquiry reached my attorney's desk within a week. My attorney sent a formal letter. Marcus's restaurant concept officially collapsed before it had ever opened. The investors he had been courting quietly withdrew. Without the anchor location, and without the fabricated co-signature, the entire structure dissolved. Two of his secondary partners, people who had believed his projections because he had implied the funding was secure, contacted him, demanding return of their deposit. Danielle called me 11 times over the course of 1 week. I read every voicemail transcript. They progressed from confused, to hurt, to angry, to the kind of desperate that wraps itself in the language of love to make the ask more palatable. The last one said, I know things have been hard between us, but you're my sister, and I know you don't actually want to see us lose everything. Just call me back, please. I waited until I was ready. Then I called her. She answered before the first ring finished. Layla, thank God. Listen, I know what the video looked like, and I'm sorry, I truly am. It was just us being stupid. You know how Marcus gets when he's had a few. It wasn't— I don't need you to explain the video, Danielle. A pause. Okay. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Of course. Did you know I was covering Mom and Dad's mortgage? A very long silence. I suspected, she finally said. I didn't know the specifics. Did you know about the other transfers? Another pause. I knew you helped when things were tight. And knowing that, I said, you still thought I was the one in the room who deserved to be mocked. She didn't answer. I'm not calling to fight, I told her. I'm calling because I love you, and I think somewhere underneath all of this, you know exactly what you've done. I don't need an apology today, but I need you to understand that what happens next with Marcus and the finances and all of it, that's not something I'm available to fix anymore. Not because I don't care, because I finally care enough about myself to stop. Danielle cried. It was real crying, not the performed kind. I could hear it, and I held the phone and I let her, and I did not rush her, and when she was done I told her I loved her, and I got off the call. I am telling you this part because I think it matters. The story does not have to end with a spotlight and a diamond gown. Sometimes the revolution is a phone call you make from a hotel room where no one sees you. Sometimes the victory is choosing, quietly, to stop. But there was one more thing. I had been invited 5 months prior, before any of this, to speak at the Houston Commercial Real Estate Summit. It was an industry event, several hundred attendees, the kind of room where deals get made and reputations get built. I had accepted the invitation as myself, Layla Mercer, founder and CEO of Mercer Capital Acquisitions. My family had been invited by coincidence. My mother had received a +4 invitation through a church associate whose husband sat on the event's advisory board. They did not know I was on the program. They assumed they were attending a gala luncheon. I found out they would be there 48 hours before the event from a seating chart my assistant flagged. I considered canceling. I genuinely did. I sat with it for an entire evening and asked myself whether I was doing this for clarity or for theater. I decided the answer was clarity, and I showed up anyway. I was introduced by the event chair with the kind of language that takes a long time to earn. She listed the firm's assets under management, the portfolio size, the notable acquisitions, the industry recognition. There was a slide behind me with the company logo and my photograph. The room was full. The applause was generous. I found my family in the third row of the general seating section about 90 seconds into my remarks. My mother's face went through several distinct phases in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, recalculation, and then something I had never seen from her before. Something that looked, for the first time in my life, like genuine awe. My father was very still. Marcus's expression was the one I will remember the longest. It was not anger. It was the particular devastation of a man who has organized his entire self-concept around being the smartest person in a room and has just discovered, in front of several hundred people, that he was wrong about the room. I did not address them from the stage. I did not look at them longer than a natural sweep of the room. I gave my remarks 20 minutes on risk-adjusted acquisition strategy in secondary markets, and I answered 3 questions from the audience, and I thanked the event chair, and I walked off the stage. They found me in the reception hall afterward. My mother reached me first. She put her hand on my arm and I turned to face her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just gotten bigger. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. Her voice was very quiet. There were people around us, and she was aware of them. "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. She opened her mouth. She closed it. My father stood a step behind her. He was holding his event program, which had my biography printed inside the cover. He had been reading it. "Layla," he started. "Dad," I said gently, "I love you, but I think you should go enjoy the rest of the reception. I have people to meet." Marcus was not with them. I later learned he had gone to retrieve the car. Danielle texted me that evening a single line. I had no idea. "I'm sorry. I mean it this time." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone in my bag and had dinner with my CFO and 2 clients who had flown in from Atlanta, and we talked about interest rate projections and laughed about something I can't even remember now. And it was the best evening I had spent in longer than I could name. The family financial arrangements concluded over the following 60 days exactly as I had outlined. My parents refinanced with a new lender and a payment they could manage with my father's pension and my mother's part-time consulting. It was tighter, but it was honest. Danielle and Marcus moved to a smaller house in a less expensive neighborhood. Marcus took a position at a regional hospitality group as a manager, an actual salary, stable, accountable. He sent me a text 3 weeks in that said only, "I didn't understand what I didn't know." I appreciated the brevity. I sit at my desk on a Wednesday morning in Houston, and the city is doing what it does. Loud and vast and indifferent in the most freeing possible way. My calendar is full. My team is good. I have a standing lunch with my 2 closest friends, women who have known me since before any of this, who called me back when I had nothing to report and no wins to share. Here is what I have learned, sisters. The people who diminish you are almost never operating from a position of genuine confidence. They are managing their own terror. And you, with your quiet competence and your refusal to perform smallness for their comfort, you frighten them. So they reach for the oldest tools available. They call you difficult, selfish, cold, lucky. Let them. Let them build their whole story on the idea of your limitations. You do not need to correct it in the moment. You do not need to announce yourself or defend yourself or justify the decisions you made in the years they were not watching. The account speaks for itself. It always does. I closed the transfer dashboard the morning after the summit. I did not do it with any ceremony. I just looked at the screen, at the long history of outgoing transfers, and I selected the final account, and I closed it. The cursor blinked once. Then the screen was clear. I poured my coffee. I opened my calendar. I got to work. The most powerful thing Layla did wasn't freezing an account or walking onto that stage. It was the moment she stopped shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's version of her. Your worth doesn't require a spotlight or a boardroom to be real. It exists in every quiet decision you make to keep going, keep building, keep being honest about what you deserve. The people who underestimated you are not the authors of your story. You are.